everyone. I'm Christel. I'm the country director of the Angkor Centre for Conservation of Biodiversity. And I would like to thank the ICZ for the opportunity to talk today about the ex-situ conservation of the Bengal Florican here at the ACCB. A large part of my presentation today is based on a peer-reviewed publication by Masood et al. Published in 2021. This is following a collaboration between the ACCB, WCS, the Ministry of Environment, and the Forestry Administration of the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries here in Cambodia. The Angkor Centre of Conservation of Biodiversity is a species conservation project of the Allwetter Zoo Ministry in Germany, and is established in 2003. The ACCB currently houses approximately 1,000 individuals belonging to 45 species of mammals, reptiles and birds native to Cambodia. Roughly 90% of the individuals at ACCB belong to a species classified as threatened by the IUCN. The main focus areas of the ACCB's work are the rescue of selected threatened wildlife native to Cambodia and the reintroduction and rehabilitation after the rehabilitation process has been completed. Ex-situ conservation of threatened species with a main focus on large water birds such as the giant and white-shouldered ibis, Bengal Florican and chelonians, and this is designed to improve protection and management of some of Cambodia's most endangered wildlife. Furthermore, we aim to advance environmental education in Cambodia and present a learning venue for local communities, international visitors and government staff. And we conduct in situ species conservation and endangered species research. The ACCB is a partner of the Asian Species Action Partnership, which is part of the IUCN Species Survival Commission, and we work closely with the Cambodian government authorities and various national and international organizations. The ACCB is providing full-time employment to 34 Khmer nationals, making up 90% of our employees. Most of them are living in nearby communities bordering our facility. So the Bengal Florican is a critically endangered species. There are two subspecies recognized, the Houbaropsis bengalensis, which occurs in India and Nepal, and Houbaropsis bengalensis blandini, which occurs in Cambodia and is extinct in Vietnam. The species inhabit seasonally inundated areas of grassland located in the Tonle Sap Lake floodplain here in Cambodia. The main threats the species faces are habitat loss and modification due to extensive loss and modification of grasslands through drainage, conversion to agriculture and plantations, overgrazing, inappropriate cutting, burning, plowing regimes, the invasion of alien species, crop expansion, and hydropower dam construction, which is leading to heavy flooding. Disturbance by people, dogs and cattle is also a threat, and in 2019 power lines have been constructed in the area, and this is also a massive threat to the species. Since the construction in 2019, 6 Bengal Floricans have been found dead in the area, among many other bird species. Extensive hunting for sports and food may have triggered the species decline. However, due to law enforcement and awareness, this is no longer a serious threat, although it is still happening. The species breeds in traditionally farmed mosaic habitat in seasonal inundated floodplains, and outside the breeding season they migrate to transitional woodlands. This time and duration of the annual migration out of the floodplains is dependent on the flood extent of the Tonle Sap Lake. Bengal Florican has an exploded leg breeding display, and there's more than 4 males required for a leg to function. Each male requires at least a 1 square kilometer habitat to perform their flight display. Females are nesting on the ground in longer grass, and the species has a strong site fidelity. The species is monitored annually in the protected area by WCS, where they count the displaying males in survey squares to be able to calculate a population estimate. As can be seen in the graph, the overall population has declined from an estimated 300 76 displaying males in 2007 to 119 males in 2019. We do need to keep in mind that there's a confidence interval, a low and a high confidence interval, which can be seen as the red dots in the graph. In 2020, the team could unfortunately not conduct any surveys due to COVID-19, and the population estimates for 2021 are still pending. The trend indicates that the population is stable at the Stung Chikrang and the Barai, Bengal Florican community areas where most of the conservation work is happening. And wild populations continue to decline at an accelerated rate, even though since 2005 everything possible within the constraints of relevant socioeconomic and political factors has been attempted to maintain populations. In 2006, the Cambodian government established integrated farming in biodiversity areas by provincial decree in 2 of Cambodia's provinces. In 2010, most of the integrated farming and biodiversity areas have been converted to 6 Bengal Florican conservation areas by ministerial decree under the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. And in 2016, the Bengal Florican conservation areas were renamed the Northern Tonle Sap Protected Landscape. This Northern Tonle Sap Protected Landscape is managed by the Ministry of Environment and is covering just over 31,000 hectares, containing most of the Bengal Florican in Cambodia. WCS is leading the nest protection activities, where in collaboration with the community protected area committees, the community members receive a fee for protecting Bengal Florican nests. The location of the nest is reported and the success of the nest is carefully followed up by WCS, the community and ACCB. Ex-situ conservation of species is difficult. It's risky, time-consuming, it's financially costly, and it can increase the risk of extinction for wild populations by removing individuals from the wild to create founder populations. But it can also prevent extinction when in-situ conservation fails and increasingly used to prevent species extinction. Successful case studies include the California condor and the crested ibis. Now, in the next few slides, I will introduce you to how we apply the IUCN captive management guidelines to the Southeast Asian subspecies of Bengal Florican. We are mindful of the need to make a timely decision on whether to proceed with captive management, but we're also aware of the potential risks of making the wrong decision. So we've been using the IUCN guidelines to support local stakeholders to make an informed, unbiased decision about the ex-situ conservation of the Bengal Florican. And having made that decision to identify risks that needed to be mitigated to maximize the chance of success. We consider only captive breeding for preventing extinction of species, for which we use the term ex-situ conservation. The ultimate goal of ex-situ conservation in this context is the reinforcement or reintroduction of wild populations, which distinguishes it from capture solely for established captive populations for display or education. For this reason, the individuals maintained and bred for ex-situ conservation should be theoretically capable of producing offspring that can survive in the wild. And ideally, and this is what we are doing here in Cambodia as well, a parallel program of in-situ conservation should ensure that populations are maintained in the wild as good as possible. The IUCN has developed guidelines to help determine how and when ex-situ management should be used in conservation. Those of you familiar with the guidelines will know that they provide a logical 5-step decision-making process that finishes with a call to make a decision that is informed by the information gathered in the preceding 4 steps, and weighing the potential conservation benefit to the species against the likelihood of success and overall costs and risks of not only the proposed ex-situ program, but also alternative conservation actions or inactions. So step 1 is a review of the status of the species. In step 2, the roles that ex-situ management could play in the conservation of the species that are defined. Step 3 is an evaluation of the precise nature of the desired ex-situ population to meet identified roles. And in step 4, resources, expertise, feasibility, and risks are appraised, and there's no method proposed for the critical fifth step, which is to make the decision on whether to initiate a captive breeding. So we first conducted a review of the status of the Bengal Florican following step 1 of the guidelines. We created a decision tree that combines step 2, the identification of the potential role of the ex-situ conservation in the conservation of the species, with the part of step 4 that evaluates risks to the wild population from ex-situ conservation. This can be seen in the decision tree in figure 1. We also developed a simple table to evaluate the practical considerations associated with ex-situ conservation of the species, which is table 1, top right of this slide, and this is covering step 3 of the process, and a similar table to evaluate practical risks, which is table 2, covering step 4 of the process. The practical risks were separated from the risks to the wild population because they can be mitigated, unlike biological risks for which mitigation is often difficult or impossible. To inform our evaluation of practical and biological risks to the wild and captive populations, which is part of step 3, and evaluate whether ex-situ management would increase the probability of persistence, we used a publicly available demographic module developed for evaluating the efficiency of captive breeding for the Great Indian Buzzard by Dolman et al., published in 2015. And we retained the same parameters as they did, using data from a range of medium and large size buzzard species, except where data existed for Bengal Florican or for the more similarly sized little buzzard, or where variations were expected based on smaller body size of the Bengal Florican. So this model allowed us to evaluate the chance of persistence of a captive population and the various strategies for collecting eggs from the wild, and the probability that individuals could be released within 50 years. We did not consider capture of adults from the wild because captive facilities that breed buzzard advised against it. And we also did not use a module to evaluate the probability of persistence of the wild population because we had insufficient data to parameterize the module, but the current trajectory based on data from 12 years of population monitoring suggests that the Bengal Florican will be functionally extinct by 2023. The captive breeding module assumes that we can collect a maximum of 5 or 10 eggs in the first year based on the mean number of eggs found annually between 2014 and 2018, but that this will decline by 2 eggs per year for 5 years as the wild population declines. Now, given the rate of decline of the wild populations, it's unlikely that harvest can continue beyond 5 years. The release module assumes that all the released birds are younger than 1 year of age to minimize the behavioral adaptation to captivity. Releases do not occur until the captive population has reached 20 mature females, so as not to jeopardize the persistence of the captive population. And we've set the minimum group size of released birds to 5 because the minimum of 4 males plus 1 female is required for the Bengal Florican exploded leg to function. Now, using this decision tree, the project partners decided to proceed with ex-situ management of the Bengal Florican, despite the risks because of the rapid potential accelerating declines in the wild population, and the likelihood that threats could not be controlled in the wild before the species was rendered extinct, and the relatively high probability of establishing a captive population. A basic plan for ex-situ management has been developed and based on those outcomes and outputs. The best possible scenario with harvest rates of 10 per year for 5 years, there are unlikely to be sufficient bird to be released for 20 to 30 years, by which time the species will almost certainly be extinct in the wild. The participants of the working group considered this information as we worked through the decision tree to assess biological risks associated with ex-situ management, but concluded that given the relatively low risk of extirpation of a well-managed captive population and the very high risk of extirpation of the wild populations, embarking on a program for ex-situ management was prudent. We did not consider how best to manage the captive population to maximize genetic variation. This could have been integrated into the assessment process. However, instead, the breeding program will be planned using molecular data obtained from any chicks that hatch from harvested eggs. At all the Bengal Florican sites, any eggs laid during July or later will be harvested, because these are probably represent later second breeding attempts that are likely to fail because of heavy rains and rising floodwater at this time. As can be seen in Table 3, the plan for harvest eggs of Bengal Florican, the different habitats where Bengal Florican still occur we explain which areas we will collect eggs from when, and you'll see that some of these eggs, for example in Sankor and Bakan, we will collect all the eggs that are found, because these areas are less protected or not protected compared to the Chikrang and the Barai area, which are falling within the Bengal Florican protected community area. It was decided to not take any adults from the wild because of the high risk of mortality, which was thought likely to lead to the entire ex-situ conservation program being closed by the government. Exceptions are being made for any individuals confiscated and are rescued from illegal hunting activities. And whenever we are called for picking up or rescuing mature or even young birds, this always goes through in collaboration with the government authorities. There's a significant chance that any reintroduction of Bengal Florican will also fail to establish a self-sustaining wild population, even if the species persists in captivity. Major reason may be the lack of habitat. If the wild population is extirpated, if the wild populations are extirpated, protection of the remaining fragments of grassland of the tonal subfloodplain might actually become harder. So habitat of the kind that is currently associated with the species may not be available for reintroduction. We have developed protocols for the Bengal Florican nest protection and collection and transport schemes, and community members are reporting any eggs found. This data is then collected by WCS. If eggs are to be collected following the egg harvesting plan, the ACCB staff will drive to the site to handle and transport the eggs. And for this purpose, we are using a portable homemade incubator box so that we can transport the eggs without risking them of cooling down. So having implemented the decision to start egg harvesting in 2019, the table in this slide shows the total of number of eggs collected since ex-situ conservation project was started in 2019. As can be seen, we did not collect any eggs this year. The Chikrang area, in the Chikrang area, this is directly related to the rains staying out and therefore the floodplain not flooding. So natural incubation and rearing has actually a good chance of survival of the chicks, so we don't want to interfere there. COVID-19 prevented intensified search of nests and eggs in any of the other areas. As can be seen in the rows of the incubation results, in total we harvested 15 eggs in the past 3 years. Of these, 8 failed and 7 succeeded. Some of the reasons that we had failed eggs is because females have been captured and eggs have been reported too late. This was especially an issue in 2019. So by the time we got to the eggs, they had cooled down too much and the embryos died. We've tried chicken incubation, but unfortunately the chicken broke one of the eggs, and we've had embryonic death of the eggs during incubation as well. The ACCB's assurance colony currently consists of 4.4 animals, 4 males and 4 females. 3 males have been rescued as adults between 2019 and 2021. 1 male and 3 females have kept hatched here at ACCB in 2019 and 2020, and 1 animal has been rescued as a chick in 2019. In December of 2020, we started with the construction of a nearly 1,700 square meter breeding facility for Bengal Florican. This facility would not have been possible without the generous funding of Mind and Nature, previously known as Wildlife Reserve Singapore. In total, there are 22 individual enclosures, 12 individual medium-sized outdoor enclosures, 2 large outdoor enclosures for introductions, and 3 small and 1 medium-sized enclosure that are connected to the nursery building, where also our incubators are located. Inside this nursery facility, there's 4 small enclosures as well. We anticipated the total carrying capacity of the enclosures for 12 to 15 adults and 20 to 30 chicks and sub-adults. This entire facility is surrounded by a predator-proof perimeter fence. Here is a short time lapse of the construction of the facility. And what you're seeing are weekly updates. Although there might be 1 or 2 weeks missing. The construction of this facility has been carried out with our own team of builders and construction officers. In order to provide suitable and predator-safe quarantine facility for confiscated Bengal Floricans, we will soon start the construction of a 66 square meter enclosure consisting of 3 netted enclosures surrounded by a predator-proof perimeter fence. This facility is funded by the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund, and they will also fund the egg harvesting and husbandry and care of our floricans for the coming 2 years. Bengal Florican has rarely been kept in captivity, and captive breeding or egg incubation has never before been attempted. So all the work that we are doing is based on experience from breeding of other bustard species. For instance, the Asian little bustard and great bustard. We have experienced in the past 2 years that the incubation period is between 22 and 25 days when egg incubation happens in an incubator. This is 25 to 28 days has been recorded in the wild. Having said that, it's not easy to know the exact incubation time when the eggs arrive at ACCB. So this is one of the reasons why we need to monitor the development of the eggs closely, which is made more difficult due to the dark color of the eggshell. The incubator settings are set to 37.5 degrees Celsius, 99.5 Fahrenheit. The relative humidity is 55 to 60%, which worked well for us. Ideally, we would set it around 50%, but this is a little bit challenging for us in our humid climate. Hopefully that will become slightly easier in the new facility once we start using the incubators there. From the internal pip to hatching, a chick can spend from 14 hours to 2.5 days. And we started to hear the chick chirping from 3 to 4 hours after the initial pip. None of the eggs that hatched in ACCB in 2019 or the ones in 2020 needed any help with hatching. I just want to show you a time-lapse video of a chick hatching here at ACCB. The rearing, similar to the egg incubation, there is nothing known about how to rear Bengal Florican chicks. So we gain experience as we go, through trial and error, and we're following guidelines based on other busted species breeding experiences. Initially, we feed the chicks 6 times a day, every 3 hours, between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. And we slowly reduce this as the chicks grow. And by the time they're 18 days old, they're being fed 2 times a day. The first 4 days we do feed the chicks by hand using tweezers. Some of the individuals might be fed a little longer like that, dependent on the individual. And we keep the lights on from the first feeding till approximately 13 minutes after the last feed. Floricans don't have a crop, so it's important to feel the abdomen to prevent overfeeding, which will result, if you overfeed, this will result in overweight and leg issues. And we've noticed that especially the first week they really keep eating as long as you keep offering food, so they don't realize when they're full. The chicks show the desired daily weight gain of approximately 8% during the first month. Now, initially our chicks are kept in a brooder of about 1/2 meter by 1/2 meter, and once they're 4 years old, we double the size of this brooder. We provide a warm spot of 36 degrees Celsius, 97 Fahrenheit, by using a heating lamp, and we notice that even the older chicks, juvenile birds, will still sleep next to the heating spot if they get a chance and the opportunity. We also encourage the chicks to walk every day to copy their natural behavior, and the time and frequency we increase as the chicks get older. We've noticed that the development of slipped wings, annual wings, and leg problems are usually first encountered between day 7 and 11 after hatching, and this is easily corrected if treated immediately. And based on the experience of other busted species, calmer captive reared individuals have greater breeding success and lower mortality rates in captivity than more fearful individuals. Our Floricans rescued from the wild are doing well, and we are familiarizing those birds by using a limited number of animal keepers to keep the birds as relaxed as possible in the presence of people. Quickly, some of our animals, especially those individuals that were older when they were rescued, are after being captured by people, can be rather picky eaters. So for some of those animals we can mix the diets, and others are eating better when we don't mix it. So we really go per individual animal, and we adjust how we present the diets, mixed or not mixed, dependent on the individual. And this table in this slide provides more information about the diet composition. In conclusion, our decision to attempt ex-situ management of the Bengal Florican was made based on a thorough evaluation of risk and resources informed by demographic modeling. We considered both philosophical and practical issues using a decision tree. The process that we used is transparent, and we hope that our decision tree will be helpful in other similar situations, and we will continue to do everything possible to prevent the loss of remaining wild populations of the Bengal Florican in Cambodia. But we acknowledge that if not managed properly, taking eggs and adults from the wild may accelerate declines. Now, with hindsight, we should have considered ex-situ management in 2012, when there was a small number of unprotected populations that had little chance of survival due to financial and practical constraints on in-situ conservation. Our results indicate that with support for busted husbandry techniques, there remains a reasonable chance of establishing a captive population. However, we anticipate that the Bengal Florican may persist only in captivity for many years, and it may never be released in a situation that resembles its current wild state. We consider this is preferable to the complete loss of the species, and captive or semi-wild individuals in that case may serve as an educational purpose. So we could not do any of our conservation work here at ACCB without the support of our partners and donors. So a big thank you to them. I am only one person in a much larger team, and I could not have done any of this alone. If you or your organization would like to support our Bengal Florican or any of our other conservation efforts, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is displayed here on the slide. Other ways of helping us would be by following us on social media, sponsoring a species or a project, or coming to volunteer with us. And if you're interested in volunteering with us, once the COVID travel restrictions are over, again, you can reach out to me on my email address here in the slide. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the presentations today.